So we've covered the present tense of the deponent verbs. Now we'll cover the imperfect tense and how to conjugate in the imperfect tense, both indicative and subjunctive. And the subjunctive, imperfect subjunctive, is by far the more challenging of the two. But again, keep in mind that you're going to use passive endings for all. So, the first and second conjugation. Remember the first and second conjugation, we used stem to form the imperfect tense. The stem plus BA plus the endings. And that rule applies for the deponent verbs too. So we have our stem, BA, and our endings. So konabar, konabaris, konabatur, konabamur, konabamani, konabantur. So same rules as you used for regular verbs. This time, though, we can only use passive endings. And the same works for the second conjugation, werior. So weribar, we have our stem, BA, plus our ending. Weribar, weribaris, weribatur, weribamur, weribamani, weribantur. So the first and second conjugation, imperfect indicative, note that, imperfect indicative is very straightforward. And the same really follows for the third and fourth conjugations too. The difference here is we used our stem plus EBA plus our endings. And this is the same rule that applied to third and fourth conjugation regular verbs too. So we have our stem, seque, EBA, and ending. Sequebar, sequebaris, sequebatur, sequebamur, sequebamani, sequebantur. And experiebar, experiebaris, experiebatur, experibamur, experibamani, experiebantur. So our fourth conjugation, the difference is we're going to see that I in there. Whether you're second, third, or fourth conjugations, though, the key is always to look for this BA. You know you're dealing in the imperfect. So that's the indicative of the imperfect. Now let's move on to the subjunctive. And you'll remember, to form the imperfect subjunctive of a regular verb, you're going to use the present active infinitive. So for woko, it would be wokare. Remember, we're using that infinitive form and adding the personal endings. Well, you know that the personal endings are going to be aristur for deponents. Right, so we've got the personal endings. But the question is, what do we do? How do we form this present active infinitive? And you have to back form it. All right? That is, your second principal part, say, of werior, is wereri. But that's not a present active infinitive, or at least it's not the form of a present active infinitive, it's a present passive infinitive. So to form the imperfect subjunctive, what we need to do is back form this second principal part into what looks like a present active infinitive. And so we do exactly the opposite of what we did to form wereri. That is, we drop the I and change it back to an E. So werere. Or if it were first conjugation, konari, we drop off the the I and change it to an E. Konare. And then we add our personal endings onto this. Or, a little more challenging, if we had sequi, a third conjugation, remember to back form this, what we did was we dropped off the whole ERE and changed that to an I. So to go the other way, we drop off the I and change it to an ERE. All right, so the third conjugation is a little more challenging. Drop off the I and change it to ERE, and then add, as I say here, the personal endings. Or fourth conjugation, the infinitive is experire. Well, there we can again drop off the final I and change it to experire. Right, so what you want to do is back form. You want to pretend as if there was a present active infinitive and form it off of the second principal part. So let's take a look at how this would work. So we have konor, konari. to try, we want the imperfect subjunctive. How do we do that? We're going to take our second principal part, change the final I to an E, and add our personal endings. So conorere, conoreris, conoretur, conoremor, conoremini, conorentur. And in the second conjugation, we're going to take for the imperfect subjunctive, take our second principal part, drop off the I and change it to an E, and add the personal endings. So rere, werereris, wereretur, wereremur, wereremini, wererentur. Now that dreaded third conjugation, which is a little more challenging. Again, we're going to take our infinitive, but instead of just dropping this E and adding and changing I and changing it to an E, we have to add an entire ERE. So sequere, and then add our personal endings. Sequerere, sequereris, sequeretur, sequeremur, sequeremini, sequerentur. And for the fourth conjugation, again, we take our second principal part, change the final EI to an E, and add our personal endings. Experere, experereris, expereretur, expereremur, expereremini, expererentur. That's all there is to it. So, the key to the imperfect subjunctive. Second principal part, but turn it into an active form. I'm going to put active in parentheses because that form really doesn't exist.